California Edition, I'm Brad Pomerance. We are coming to you from the Cannon House office building in Washington, D.C. We are joined by Alan Lowenthal. He is a member of the United States Congress representing Long Beach and surrounding areas. How's your new job?
I love it.
Tell me why.
Well, first I'm humbled and honored to be a member of Congress, Brad. It's just a great honor to be representing my community and listening to folks and trying to bring back or do legislation that's both good for the district and for the nation.
And let's talk about the folks. It looks like you may have a vote in a few minutes, but hopefully we can keep talking. Let's talk about the fact, though, that in your district you represent significant interests that may be impacted by the defense industry.
Yes.
And we know that with the sequester, there have been significant cuts to the defense industry. The defense industry hit particularly hard. I think you need to cut 13% this year. Next year it may be different. So what are your constituents saying about the sequester? Are they feeling the impacts yet?
Well, the immediate impact was, just outside of Long Beach, and Los Alamitos is the Joint Forces Training Base, which is really for the California Air National Guard and the Army Reserves and other military branches of government. And it's critically important that that base stay open and function well, because that's really what provides if there's any kind of natural disaster in California, forest fires, that's where it's done. And the sequester badly hurt that base in the sense that it began to furlough many of the Department of Defense employees.
But what's surprising when you look at how the sequester is rolling out is we see that with regard to air traffic controllers, we'll do a fix for them. We'll see with regard to meat inspectors, we'll do a fix for them. The defense industry, we don't see a fix. Head Start spots, we don't see a fix. It's a little baffling when you look at how it's rolling out. Is that your sense? Is that your constituents' sense?
That's the sense for my constituents and my sense. When you do a meat cleaver approach to really deficit reduction, you're going to have terrible inequities. And so really what's happened is the Congress has then tried to fix some of the most egregious kinds of inequities. But really, if you don't have a constituency, if you don't really are able to have advocates here in Washington, if you're a Head Start child, you're not going to have that fix.
At the same time, the markets don't seem to be upset by the sequester. We are seeing deficit reduction. The impacts haven't been overwhelming. Yes, you can point to some economic statistics. Maybe GDP is not growing as fast as it would without the sequester. So could one argue, it's not such a bad deal. We're getting our deficit under control. Let's let it ride for a little while.
This is year one, Brad. This sequester is going to go on for 10 years, and it's going to increasingly get worse, and because it really wasn't planned. And you're going to see over the years a number of attempted fixes. I think that the real issue is how are we going to step back and really deal with our budget? And that's the critical issue. Or are we going to do it on a crisis mentality? And that's what we've been doing.
And so will the members, both Democrats and Republicans, step back? We don't see any movement as we speak today. I guess the fiscal year begins October 1st or around that time. Is that when we'll look at it?
Well, let me step back and answer that question. When I first came to Congress, which is only a little over 100 days ago, so I'm not an expert.
Okay.
People said, how come you're going to this dysfunctional body? And I would say, well, I'm a psychologist.
Well, you did come from Sacramento.
I'm a psychologist, so I seek out dysfunctionality.
Let's do this. Let's continue the conversation when we come back. I want to hear more. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So, Congressman, you were in what some call a dysfunctional location in Sacramento. You're now in Washington, but you're seeking to change that environment.
Well, that's what people asked, all new members. And so, people come with a passion to want to fix things or to do things in there. And so there are differences between Democrats and Republicans. And when you have a divided House, that's what happens. But really what is going on also, primarily among the freshman members in the Congress, and there's a lot of freshman members, both Republicans and Democrats, is that we're going to try to see where are their common ground. How can we begin to work together to demonstrate that that we can seek agreement among ourselves and that we can work together. And that group is called the No Labels or the Problem Solvers.
Right, I've heard of it.
And what we're doing is we've now identified 8 bills that we've created among the freshmen, Republicans and Democrats, that really have to do with government efficiency. How can we make this government more efficient and save money? That is a common thread that both Democrats and Republicans like. And so if we can come together as a group of problem solvers and come up with a common agenda, that will be a tremendous step forward. We're not going to solve all the problems right away, but we're going to begin to work on those that we can find common agreement.
Will the leadership of the respective parties allow the freshmen to kind of flex their muscle?
Well, I think that's a very good question. We will see. But I think what's happening is when I first arrived, there were about 20 of us that were, and I joined that the first week. Now, with 100 days later, we're close to 70, and within a month, we'll be over 100 members. So
that's
this
serious.
is growing at a tremendous rate now. And not only freshman members, other members of Congress are now also wanting to join the group.
Are one of the areas the group is willing to tackle immigration reform?
Well, I think that immigration reform has already been laid out already, and I think that there are issues, you know, I have to compliment whether you call it the Gang of Eight or others, for really coming together with a bipartisan approach. So I think the issue will be is that can you find common consensus and to move forward a common package? I think that there are real reasons that both parties really would like to see immigration reform.
But when you think about the two different branches of the Congress, the Senate does seem to be at some level coming together in a bipartisan fashion for immigration reform. In the House, what we've seen so far is a couple of piecemeal bills put forth, one dealing with, I think, E-Verify, one dealing with guest workers. Right. And so while it would appear that the Republicans, your friends on that side of the aisle, are looking toward some fix to immigration reform, a lot of your friends on the Republican side, they don't represent districts that are ag districts or have significant immigrant populations. So,
well, I think you're right. But I think that what you're saying is that the Republicans in the Senate are more unified in what they want to do. I think Leader Boehner, the Speaker, has much more difficulty kind of uniting his caucus. And so what you're seeing is that the legislation on immigration reform will come out of the Senate.
Right.
I think what will happen here is that a number of Republicans will join with Democrats to fashion a bill. It won't come out of this House, but it'll start in the Senate, which will give then some cover to Speaker Boehner to not having to expose his members. He could, some of the more conservative members who do not want immigration reform, and it'll allow the members that do want to do it to say, well, it came from the Senate, we're just going to follow
But do you think you can get to that magic number? Is it 218?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have no doubt, because both, and in terms of the right thing to do in terms of immigration reform, in terms of dealing with the issue of all those undocumented persons who are here in the country, and the fact that immigration, in terms of our policies for future immigration, those policies are broken now. It's critically important for the nation to have a rational immigration policy which will provide the workers to be able to move forward American businesses.
What about on the question of the border, though? Because that is the issue that really starts to divide Democrats and Republicans.
But I think the Republicans there have made great concessions, and they have to be complimented. Originally, they said that border security would be in place at first. You have to have all those requirements at first in order to have a path to citizenship. They have now given that up, and they've said that, yes, we do need border security. They're still sticking with that, but that will not preclude moving people towards a path to citizenship. And it's just before they receive their green cards. That is a major step forward. What it does is give us 10 years to work out a compromise.
Confident?
Well, I think that, that compromise, it means that this bill will not cover everything, but it'll give us enough breathing room.
His name is Alan Lowenthal, member of the US Congress. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.
In what year does the Census Bureau predict Anglos will no longer make up a majority of the United States population? 2033, 2038, 2043, or 2051? The U.S. Census Bureau estimates that in 2043, Anglos will no longer comprise a majority of residents of the United States.
You're watching California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are coming to you from the Cannon House office building in Washington, D.C. We are joined by Janice Hahn, member of the United States Congress. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to speak with you about the ports. We know the significance of the ports to California, to the nation. And I want to get a sense from you if the ports are being impacted by what we know as the sequester, the deficit reduction plan that went into place in March.
Well, when I go home every weekend, I spend time in my district talking to businesses, to nonprofits, to people who are working at the port to find out, how is this sequester affecting you? And I heard loud and clear from our ports that it really was having an effect.
Really?
Our Customs and Border Patrol officers who are there to inspect everything from crew members who come on and off the cruise ships to the containers, were very concerned in the loss of officers because of potential furloughs. And they were already seeing a slowdown. In other words, the trucks were beginning to queue up, unlike they have in a long time, trying to get in and out of the port because of this.
And what's interesting when you talk about furloughs is recently furloughs were issued to air traffic controllers. When that happened, boy, the Congress acted quickly, and we saw that issue resolved as it relates to the sequester. Yet when we're talking about border safety or Head Start or Meals for Wheels, we're not seeing action. And that can be frustrating to constituents, I would presume.
It was, and you know, I'm one of those, like many people here, who want to have a balanced approach to our deficit and to spending and replace these horrible sequester cuts with something more balanced. So some of the pain that we were hearing about, particularly with the FAA, in one sense, if it had gone on a little bit longer, I think maybe we could have gotten the grand bargain and had a common sense approach to our deficit and spending. But it seemed a little self-serving recently when we were so quick to fix the FAA problem, especially on the day that the senators and the Congress members were racing to the airport to go home.
Let's talk about a grand bargain, because President Obama has been fighting for a grand bargain for some time. He's presented cuts in entitlements, cuts in various social programs. He's asking the Republicans to come back and talk about closing certain tax loopholes, increase revenues. But the Republican response is, look, we gave you your tax increases in December when we were dealing with the fiscal cliff. We're not moving anymore. And so when you have two positions so entrenched, how do we ever find a grand bargain?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think that's what we're struggling with right now. But clearly, since I've been in Congress, which is only, it's been less than 2 years, we have gone from one crisis to the next. We've been governing around man-made crises, whether it was the debt ceiling or the Budget Control Act or sequestration. It's a difficult way to govern, and I think we need to take the approach that yes, we need to get this deficit under control. Yes, we need to look at our spending, but there's a lot of us who don't feel like this is the right time to stop all investment in our infrastructure, in our transportation system, in our education, in our schools. I mean, this is the kinds of investment that actually long-term will really help the growth in this country and put us on a much better track.
But do you feel as if that congressional members from both parties see that and want to move forward? Because we don't hear much talk about sequestration.
Well, there was a majority of Congress members wanted to see these cuts. They felt like unless we did it through sequestration, we would never get the cuts that we were asking for. So many of them have gone back to their districts and said, we finally got the cuts we wanted. I think they're harmful. I think they're hurting a lot of people.
When we come back, let's talk more about it. For our viewers on HLN, thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. Now, Congresswoman, the irony, though, about the current situation is the economy is doing better. And so the pain of the sequestration isn't as dramatic because the economy is doing better. More tax receipts are coming in, so our deficit numbers are decreasing, not only because of sequestration, but because of improved tax receipts. We may not see another debt ceiling crisis until October, so it's almost as if there won't be a need for a discussion because it's not so bad.
Right, of course, that's what we were saying. We were saying if we just let the economy grow and we invest in jobs, you know, we will see more tax receipts. We will see more job creation. So that was our goal.
But let me shift gears, if I may, as we continue the interview and speak about immigration, because that's also an issue that touches your district in ways that one may not realize. Of course, you do have a significant population of immigrants, but you have that port, which is a border. And so much of the immigration discussion today is focused upon border security. We think about the border at San Diego and Tijuana, but we have another border, and that is the port. So explain to me what's happening on the border security question.
Well, I think there will not be comprehensive immigration reform unless there is a strong border security piece of it.
Okay.
There is a lot of you know, really, there's opposition to immigration reform without the fact that we can say we need to secure our borders. And we do need to secure our borders. You know, I'm more interested in making sure that this is a fair, safe, humane, compassionate effort to bring, you know, 11 million people out of the shadows in this country and allow them to have a pathway to become citizens.
But how do you respond to those that would say, yes, the 11 million are living in the shadows, but you know what? They broke the law. They shouldn't have come this way, and as a result, we shouldn't put them in the front of the line. And that's what the Gang of Eight bill out of the Senate would do. It puts them at some level at the front of the line. Yes, it will take 13 years to get citizenship, but they still get a preference. How would you respond?
You know, a lot of people, I mean, we're a country of immigrants. And we're a country where people move. I mean, I think every one of us has moved our families at one point or another in our lives for a job, for better schools. I mean, we know that as Americans what that means to move. And if we can look at it as families moving here for a better life. And by the way, you know, last time I checked, there really wasn't a line. There's no going to the back of the line. There's no going to the front of the line. You know, what we're going to do is make sure that we have enough resources to process all those who are already legally in this line. We're going to clear this backlog quickly, and I think that's a really important piece of this. But then I think, you know, we need to, as quickly as possible, particularly for the young people who are here, many young people who came here through no fault of their own. That is true. 2 years old, they've been in our school, they've pledged allegiance to that flag every morning of their lives. They are as American as you and me, except on paper. And I think we're ready now for a good, comprehensive immigration reform that deals with guest workers, that deals with some of these visas, that deals with, again, a compassionate way to allow people who want to become citizens to become citizens. At
the same time, there's no doubt in the Senate, they are working through a comprehensive package. In the House, what we see as we speak today is piecemeal legislation. We see E-Verify being submitted, guest worker being submitted. We see a lot of Republicans who do not represent districts that are impacted by immigration questions. Sure, in California, Central Valley Republicans understand the issue, but you go to, I mean, your colleagues on the Republican side, they may not have any sense of how immigration impacts certain communities. So how do you speak to them, talk to them, explain to them the challenges California faces?
Well, I do know that we have a couple of Californians who have been working. We have our own kind of gang of 10 or 12, that have been working in secret. I think now they've been exposed, but I know there's some good Californians.
Republicans?
And Democrats. Yeah, Republicans and Democrats. I've talked to them, and they're looking to also come together for, you know, a good compromise that takes in, you know, a lot of these pieces. So I have hope. I was a little discouraged after we failed to pass even a expanded background check for guns. But I really do have hope that this will pass. And I think the Republican Party, for political reasons, needs to do immigration reform. I think they found in the polls in the last election that they were really distant from...
They face challenges with minority communities.
Yeah, it's with the minority community. So I really think for political reasons, they need this. So whatever reason they want to use as a reason to do this, I'm all for it.
She's Janice Hahn, member of the US Congressman Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.
For how many years did Janice Hahn's father, Kenneth Hahn, serve on the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors? 26 years, 30 years, 34 years, or 40 years? Kenneth Hahn served as a Los Angeles County Supervisor for 40 years, from 1952 to 1992.
Welcome to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joining you from the Cannon House office building in Washington, D.C., and we are joined by Scott Peters, one of the newest members of the United States Congress, representing significant portions of San Diego County. How's your new job?
Well, it's great. It's quite an honor to be here, and I came with the attitude that many of the people in my first-year class came with, which was we're here to solve problems, to fix, not fight, and that's what I'm about.
How's that going for you?
Well, I'd say mixed results.
Like I said,
I've joined a group called No Labels that's designed to create new rules for Congress to make us more responsive to a 21st century world, and it's more global. And
I recently spoke with Mr. Lowenthal, also
right.
a new member of Congress, and he is part of that caucus, and he
right.
similarly is a bit bullish about it, feels as if we can move forward, but tremendous challenges in a polarized environment.
Like I say, 20% of the Congress is brand new. We all got the same message from voters in November, which is to start working together. So that's what we're about. And if we can keep that mission in our heads and help push that up to leadership, I think we can have an effect over time.
Let's talk about one issue that is seriously impacting San Diego County as an example, and that's the sequester,
right?
Whereby there are, some are calling draconian cuts, and specifically to the defense industry. It's the industry that's being hit the hardest, especially in 2013, because right. there is a year of cuts in this in a 9-month period. How is the defense industry doing in San Diego?
Well, our economy in San Diego is driven by 3 drivers. One is tourism, one is defense, which is about a quarter of our jobs, right. and the other is the innovation economy around telecom and biotechnology research. So it's very important to us, and sequester is very damaging. First, because of the cuts; those are difficult in themselves, but also they're not related to the mission. The problem with the sequester, which was this 2011 invention when they couldn't come to an agreement, was it cuts every line item in the budget. So it has nothing to do with the mission, and the admirals and the generals are really frustrated that we would make those cuts that way, not give them flexibility on how to adjust it according to the mission, and also these contractors who have are not really quite sure about how their work is going to go. They can't make plans. So we did a temporary fix that'll last for a few months, but this comes back to bite us again in October. We have to sit down like the people would like us to do and do a real budget.
But when you look at what's happening in Congress, there's not a lot of discussion about the sequester. There's a lot of discussion about immigration
right.
or gun control. It seems to have fallen off. I mean, could it be because the markets aren't responding negatively? You don't see a big hue and cry. Yes, the air traffic controllers issue got a big scream out.
Well, we're putting duct tape on each of these things as they come along. But listen, when I go home to the district, and we have a district work week about once a month, I was just there. They're talking about the sequester, and what's striking? Oh, absolutely. What's striking to me, and I'm talking to people who are laid off, people who don't know if they're going to have jobs because their company's not sure what's going to happen. And what strikes me about Washington is how disconnected this place still is from what's happening to everyday Americans.
But what I'm wondering is, because San Diego is so tied to the defense industry, if you are hearing a viewpoint that is unique as it relates to other members of Congress. Other members that may not have defense industry in their district may not be hearing that hue and cry about the sequester. And so it becomes difficult to move the needle.
Well, I'm not sure why it is, but I'll tell you that I think it's more than that, because I just think that the politics has so locked up this place. I ran on something called no budget, no pay, the idea that if you don't pass a budget, Congress shouldn't get paid. We got the Senate to pass their budget, and now both sides aren't appointing the conferees that would come together and work those things out. That's what we need to have happen, so we get past these kinds of things like the sequester, which was supposed to be so bad it would never happen, and yet here we are.
We're speaking with Scott Peters, member of the US Congress. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. Sir, you represent San Diego. The county is right on the border with Mexico,
right.
And so there is no doubt that the issue of immigration reform must be on top of the minds of so many of your constituents. Right. What are they saying at these town halls that you attend once a week, every month?
Well, immigration affects us in a few ways, 3 ways mainly in San Diego. First, we rely very heavily on our high-tech workforce. And we know that one of the problems we have is we don't have enough visas, we don't have enough permission slips to get a lot of those scientists and highly educated workers into the county to do the jobs we have them to do. And then, of course, when we educate them here, maybe they go to University of California in San Diego, get a degree in science, the immigration laws make them leave instead of making their inventions or they're starting their companies here, which we think is ridiculous.
There's no doubt that in the Senate version of immigration reform, a lot of those issues are addressed. More visas for students that come from another country. That being said, when you look at the two branches of the Congress, the Senate seems to be moving forward in a bipartisan fashion. The House, I'm not sure if we're seeing that so much. Well, we don't see a comprehensive approach in the House. We see a piecemeal approach.
We have our own gang of 8, and I think it remains to be seen kind of how we deal with it, and I hope we do, because in addition to that high-tech workforce, we've also got a lot of companies that are involved in the tourist industry that's very important to us, hotels, restaurants, that need a rationalization. We don't want our employers to be cops on the immigration beat. It doesn't make any sense.
But on the issue of the border, your district, I'm not sure if you're right on the border, but be that as it may, San Diego County, on the issue of the border, that seems to be the issue that causes the most consternation amongst those fearful of immigration reform. Do you feel as if, as the Gang of 8 proposal in the Senate has been drafted, that will allay the fears of those that are most interested in border security before moving forward on a path to citizenship?
I think so. I mean, I don't think any deal is perfect, and I would certainly think there are things that I would like to change in any particular proposal, but that's generally the right approach. And if you think about it too, the Chamber of Commerce in San Diego, our biggest issue is border trade, making our border crossing work for the movement of goods. A border crossing is all about security. Everyone who goes through there is screened. I think we have to realize that we're doing a pretty good job on border security. We need to make it, we have a broken border that we have to fix, and we have to really focus on being efficient so that legal trade can promote prosperity on both sides.
At the same time, if we look back, for example, to 1986, when there was the effort by President Reagan to reform immigration, there's no doubt that in retrospect, the border security issue was not handled as it may have been if they had known, in hindsight. So again, when you speak with members that may not be representing border states, they may not have a sense of what that cross-border trade does for an economy. And so you're really, at some level, speaking in a vacuum. How do you talk to those members to explain to them, assuming you're supporting this immigration reform effort, that this matters?
Well, part of it is people have to understand that trade doesn't start in Ohio. It starts at the border and at the ports. And so it really does affect people across the country, as it does people in agriculture across the country, and hotels, and in home health care. So it affects all of us. We're not about to deport 11 million people. It just doesn't make sense. We need something that's practical. We need to pay attention to border enforcement. We don't want guns and drugs being smuggled. And we have to get these people who are living in the shadows on the tax rolls and make them tax-paying Americans, so that we feel like we're being fair to taxpayers.
So aside from the border issue, which many believe at some level the Gang of 8 plan is addressing, there's that question of pulling people out of the shadows. And I've spoken with Republican members, and their concern is, why are we giving them a pass? This is amnesty. We shouldn't be allowing them to get to the front of the line. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I think that people who are working here ought to be paying taxes, and one of the things, I think undocumented people are paying a lot of taxes, but probably by offering them legal residency and recognizing that they're a part of their economy, the economy which they are, we can be even more fair to taxpayers. I think you have to earn citizenship. I don't think citizenship is something we give away. As I understand the proposals, there's a fairly long line
13 years
to get into that path, and I just think it's impractical to suggest that we're going to deport these people, which is kind of what the law says now. The cost of doing that and the economic loss that would be occasioned by losing those workers, and we don't have the workforce for agriculture, it just doesn't make sense.
So if you had to predict by the end of your first term, do you believe we will see comprehensive immigration reform pass both houses of Congress and be signed by President Obama?
Well, I'm new here, Brad, but I will tell you that would be the logical thing that would happen, and I think that's the kind of thing we should look for.
Okay, his name is Scott Peters. He is a member of the United States Congress representing significant portions of San Diego County. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.